What's up, investors? This is the Russian dude. New place for a couple of weeks. Russia may be heading towards one of those boring-looking bureaucratic moments that sounds like nothing at first, but actually tells us where the entire system may be going next. Because in 2027, Elvira Nabiullina's current term as governor of the Central Bank of Russia is supposed to expire. And suddenly, Moscow's rumor machine is already asking the question: does Putin really keep this woman who spent years defending the ruble, the only competent person in his entire system and inner circle? Or does he finally replace her with somebody who will help government squeeze more money out of the economy before inevitably destroying everything? And yes, I know Central Bank of Russia appointments do not exactly sound like the kind of sensational topic that makes people jump out of their chair. Ukrainians approached here, Russians defended here, but this is Russia, and in Russia the quiet office with spreadsheets can sometimes matter more than the loud office with flags, medals and patriotic speeches. Because when the money starts running out, all the propaganda in the world does not magically balance the budget. According to the Bell, the possible candidates to replace Nabiullina include Maxim Oreshkin, the current deputy chief of Putin's staff, Pyotr Fradkov, the head of Bank, and the son of also a former Russian prime minister, and then finally the third candidate, Andrei Kostin, the head of VTB. Normally we would not spend too much time on Kremlin personnel gossip, because in Putin's personalist system one loyal office replacing another loyal official often changes very little for ordinary people, but still, the central bank is extremely different. You will see today. The finance ministry is also different. The people managing money are different because they cannot live completely inside this Putin's fantasy. They can repeat the official slogans, they can serve the system, but they can even stay loyal. But as soon as they just do something what they have to do, as soon as they still have to deal with inflation, deficits, banks, exchange rates and budget math nevertheless. And numbers do not care about television speeches. Inflation does not become patriotic just suddenly because someone on state TV said so. The ruble does not stabilize itself because Dmitry Medvedev posted another angry message about the West. So today, let's talk about why Nabiullina matters, why Putin has kept her for so long, why many powerful Russian elites clearly dislike her, why 2027 may be a major turning point, and why her possible departure may signal that the Kremlin is preparing to sacrifice the ruble in order to keep the state machine running. Here's where it gets interesting, because Russian economic officials are often described as liberals. But that word creates a very misleading picture. Elvira Nabiullina, Anton Siluanov, Maxim Oreshkin are not liberals in the normal political meaning of that word. They are not opposition figures. They are not some secret Democrats hiding inside the system. They are not waiting for the right moment even to rescue Russia from Putin's course. They are career officials. In a system like Russia's, people with strong independent views do not usually rise to the very top of financial management. If someone spends way too much time questioning the big boss, the one and only, criticizing the system, or even developing a personal political position, the slightest, the smallest one, they usually fall off the ladder, physically and metaphorically speaking, long before they can reach the central bank board or the financial ministry. What makes these people different is not ideology, it is forced realism. That is the key point. The security elite can live in a world of abstractions. People like Sergei Naryshkin, Alexei Bortnikov, Nikolai Patrushev and Dmitry Medvedev can talk about civilizational battles, the Anglo-Saxons, historical destiny, imaginary enemies, and internal threats invented yesterday just for political convenience. They can spend all day describing Russia as a great fortress surrounded by conspiracies, because their job does not require them to control the price of bread. But Nabiullina does not have that luxury. If she makes a bad political, financial or even personal decision, inflation can accelerate, the ruble can weaken, banks can start shaking, and ordinary people first of all will feel it very quickly in stores, savings, salaries and loans. Anton Siluanov has the same problem with the budget. He cannot just dream about imperial glory all day, because someone has to check whether the state can even pay its workers, pensions, regions, and the growing list of obligations created by this war economy. This is why these officials sometimes look liberal compared to the rest of Putin's elite, not because they oppose the system, but because they are forced to say the most dangerous sentence in Moscow, and they're the only ones who can. The numbers simply do not work. When someone promises 1,000 modern jets in 8 years, Russian-made CPUs, a revived car industry, and a high-speed railway between Moscow and St. Petersburg, the patriotic crowd can applaud all they want. But the economic bloc has to look at the cost and quietly just ask the most obvious question: where is the money supposed to come from? And when Putin says Russia can sustain a long confrontation, maybe even for 20 plus years, he is speaking just from his self-image as a historic ruler, almost like a modern Peter the Great. That's the biggest comparison that he always gives us. But the economic officials understand something much colder, much pragmatic. No matter how imperial the speech sounds, the state still needs money. That is why Putin treats the economic bloc differently. He may not like what they tell him, but he knows they are useful. And in a system built on loyalty, usefulness can sometimes protect you better than popularity. That is precisely why Putin is forced to keep them against the will. And unlike Putin, I am not going to force you guys to check our Patreon, where you can get additional chapter at the end of each episode, including this one. The link for those curious of you guys is down below in the description and pinned comment. Thanks much for checking it out, it truly means a lot. Now let's continue. Now here is the paradoxical part. Because Vladimir Putin has personally seen state bankruptcy twice, and that experience seems to matter a lot to him personally. First, he saw the Soviet Union collapse. This was not some tiny state with no resources. There was a superpower with nuclear weapons, the biggest union, not I'm gonna say country, in the world. A huge military, space achievements, nuclear energy, influence stretching all the way from Mongolia to Cuba. And yet, when the system ran out of functioning money and economic stability, all of that imperial machinery folded extremely fast, faster than anyone anticipated. And then came 1998, when Putin was already close to federal power and saw Russia default on its own debt obligations. Again, the lesson was brutal. When the state runs out of money, everything else becomes unstable very quickly. This is probably why Putin treats his economic officials almost like shamans who know this specific ritual dance that just keeps the money tree growing and alive. He does not let them decide obviously the direction of the country, but he needs them to keep the machine functioning while he pursues that direction. As long as the money keeps flowing, Putin can try to do everything at once. He can fund the war effort, keep regions quiet, build missiles like Oreshkin, and still talk about historic missions. But once the money runs out, every single problem becomes much harder, because suddenly the state has to choose between priorities it previously pretended could all be funded at the same time. This explains Nabiullina's unusual survival. She has been criticized for years. She is disliked by people closer to Putin like Sergei Chemezov, head of Rostec, and many others in the state business elite who want just cheaper money, lower interest rates, and more financial support for large companies. Surprise, surprise. But she, Elvira Nabiullina, has stayed in a place because Putin understands that the central bank cannot be run like a propaganda studio. If you put a fantasy-driven security official in charge of the central bank, you may get potentially beautiful patriotic language, but a disaster in the financial system inevitably will come. So Nabiullina survives not because everyone likes her, but because she performs a function few people in the system can perform. She keeps the financial machine from overheating way too quickly. But that same role now creates a conflict, because Russia's state spending is absolutely enormous. The budget is under pressure, and the elite wants money to become cheaper. Nabiullina's job is to fight inflation and defend stability, but the government increasingly needs the opposite: lower rates, more borrowing, more money, and ruble that helps budget revenues, and them personally. That is where the biggest conflict of Russia's economy and today's video begins. Here is the catch. Many powerful people in Russia believe the central bank should stop acting like a guardian of inflation and start acting like a funding tool for the state and big businesses. This is where once again Sergei Glazyev's economic logic becomes important. The idea is extremely simple and attractive. If the economy needs growth, print more money. If large companies need help, give them cheap credit. If the government needs funds, make the financial system serve the state more directly. Sounds easy, I guess. And if someone disagrees, just accuse them of sabotaging the national economy or serving foreign interests, declare them foreign agent, and kick them out of the country. That is why people like Sergei Chemezov, Oleg Deripaska, Andrei Belousov, back when he served as Putin's economic advisor, all of them have repeatedly pushed ideas that clash with Nabiullina's approach. They want growth, cheaper loans, and more support for their industry, especially under wartime pressure. But Nabiullina's central bank has been doing completely the opposite. It has kept policy extremely tight, with the key lending rate around 20%, because inflation is a very real threat, and because the government has been pouring money into the economy through military spending while the central bank tries to pull money back out of it. One side is pressing the gas, another side is pressing the brake, and somehow the car called Russia is expected to keep just moving straight without swerving into the oblivion. Of course, this makes a lot of people angry. In the Russian system, when powerful people are angry, they do not simply say so. They do not say, we disagree with the monetary framework. No, that would be too normal, too Western, I guess. No, they start suggesting that the central bank is serving the Federal Reserve, or the so-called world government, or foreign interests, or that Nabiullina is sabotaging Putin's orders. By 2025, Vladimir Solovyov, the state television clown who often reflects elite anger, openly accused Nabiullina of sabotaging Putin's orders and claimed that the central bank's sovereign policy was damaging the economy. It's not just random television noise at this point. In Russia, these attacks often signal that powerful people from above want their target to be weakened. And yet Nabiullina still stayed. That is the strange part, to be honest. She kept her job even while being accused of hurting the war effort, damaging defense contracts, and keeping interest rates painfully high. The main question is, why? Well, because she represents stability and her reputation matters. She is widely credited with helping prevent the ruble from collapsing after 2014 annexation of Crimea. Some even argue she helped prevent the exchange rate from sliding towards something catastrophic, like 500 rubles per dollar. Whether that exact claim is fully fair or not, reputation itself matters in financial systems. If businesses, banks, and households believe the central bank governor will defend the ruble, that belief can help stabilize expectations themselves. Just belief alone. If that person suddenly leaves now, well, guess what? People immediately ask questions and immediately ask what changed. And that is why 2027 matters so much. If Nabiullina leaves at the end of her legal term, the Kremlin can present it as just something normal and procedural. No drama, no scandal, just the law. But behind that calm explanation, the real message may be much bigger. The old policy of defending the ruble may be ending, and a new policy of financing the budget may be beginning, with the first chapter of this new policy about the upcoming budget crisis being written literally in front of our own eyes. Now keep this in mind, because it's about to come back. Russia's real problem is not Nabiullina personally. The real problem is the federal budget. The government is under serious pressure. There is the official budget deficit, which has already exceeded 12 months target by the end of the first quarter alone. There is also the hidden pressure, regional debts, unofficial war-related expenses, and all the payments that do not always appear cleanly in the official numbers. At some point, the state has to choose what it sacrifices. Raising taxes sounds easy, and that's pretty much what governments usually do first, I guess. But Russia has already squeezed households and businesses way too much, way too heavily. If the economy is already slowing, taking even more from people and companies can make the slowdown even worse. Borrowing more also becomes difficult when the interest rates are already extremely high. I mean, yes, the government can continue borrowing from the banks, but at rates that look more like emergency financing, once again 20+% for credit. I mean, it just doesn't look normal. Well, then they can force oligarchs to contribute hundreds of billions rubles each. Also may sound dramatic, and for one oligarch that is obviously just a huge amount. But for the federal budget, it is not a grand solution anyways. It is more like just plugging a large hole in the wall with a small piece of tape and pretending that the wall is fixed. I mean, so then what options left then? Well, there is default, which is dangerous. There is taking people's bank savings, which will also be politically explosive. And then there is the most convenient option, I guess. Just weaken the ruble and print more money. But this is a hidden tax if you think about it. The elegant authoritarian trick. Instead of openly taking money from the people, the state just makes their money worth completely nothing, worth less to begin with. And the budget logic is extremely clear. If oil is $100 per barrel and the exchange rate is 70 rubles per dollar, one barrel brings 7,000 rubles. But if the oil is $50 per barrel and the exchange rate is 300 rubles per dollar, suddenly one barrel brings in 15,000 rubles. That is the brutal cold math. Russia cannot fully control the dollar price of the oil, but it can very well influence how many rubles it gets from each dollar of export revenue. So a weaker ruble can immediately help the government receive more rubles, even if the real economy suffers. Of course, the consequences would be serious and potentially most likely devastating. A weaker ruble means higher inflation, more expensive imports, weaker savings, higher costs for businesses, and lower purchasing power for just ordinary people. But it can also push people to withdraw money from the banks or convert savings into safer assets, which makes it even harder for the government to borrow from the banking system in the first place. So as you can see, this is not a very good solution. But when a government is trapped between budget pressure, wartime spending, recession risks, and inflation, there just might simply not no good solutions left. There are only bad and not so bad solutions with just different political costs. And from the Kremlin's short-term perspective, devaluation may look way safer than default or less explosive than directly taking from people's savings. This is exactly why replacing Nabiullina suddenly makes strategic sense. To follow this path, Putin would need a central bank governor with a different worldview, not someone whose reputation is built on fighting inflation and stabilizing the ruble, but someone who prioritizes budget revenues, lower rates and state financing. This is why the names matter. Once again, Maxim Oreshkin, Andrei Kostin, Pyotr Fradkov are not famous monetary policy specialists in the Nabiullina style. No, they are just state management and banking figures who at least understand the government's need for money. They are much more likely to accept that the central bank's job may become supporting the state budget, even if inflation most likely gets worse. So Nabiullina's future is not just a personal question, it is a signal. If she stays, Putin may still want the old balancing act. If she leaves, the Kremlin may be preparing for a new phase. And in case it happens, the new phase is almost guaranteed to become critical for Russia's economy. That is the trigger we've all been waiting for. There is a twist that many people miss. The law itself gives the Kremlin a convenient cover. Once again, Nabiullina's term expires in 2027. Under normal legal procedure, she would have to step down unless the law itself is changed. But in Putin's Russia, well, if the Kremlin truly wants to keep someone in place, the law, as you can remember, can be amended very quickly. The State Duma can move fast when the political order comes from above, especially from the one and only. So the question is not whether the law allows Nabiullina to stay. The question is whether Putin wants her to stay. If the law is changed, that means the Kremlin still wants Nabiullina's stabilizing role. It means Putin still believes that even under budget pressure, the ruble and inflation need a professional defender. But if the Kremlin allows her term to end naturally, then her exit can be presented as normal, legal, calm and boring even, while actually marking the major economic turn in Russia's history. For Nabiullina herself, this could be the cleanest exit possible. She does not need to resign loudly, she does not need to protest, she does not need to create a political drama. She can simply leave, because the term is over. Very rare in Russian political system. And honestly, from her position, why would she even want to stay if the next phase requires policies that damage everything she is known for? Her reputation is built on stability. She is associated with defending the ruble, fighting inflation and keeping the financial system functional under extreme pressure. If the government now wants to weaken the ruble, lower rates, tolerate more inflation and use the central bank to finance the budget, that is not Nabiullina's policy identity. That is almost exactly the opposite. This is why her departure would immediately create tension. Banks, businesses and ordinary Russians would start asking what comes next. Will rates fall? Will the government print more money? Will the ruble become the main victim in the budget crisis? And if someone like Oreshkin, Kostin or Fradkov replaces her, the signal would be even hard to ignore. Oreshkin is close to Putin's administration and understands government priorities. Kostin, as head of VTB Bank, represents state banking and large-scale financial management. Fradkov, on the other hand, is just a head of Promsvязь Bank and the son of former prime minister. And he's just, in general, deeply connected to the state financial system. These are not random names. They point towards a more government-centered central bank, one less focused on strict inflation discipline and more open to helping the state fund itself. And for ordinary Russians, that could mean a very simple reality. The same ruble savings buy less, the same salaries cover fewer goods, the same bank deposits lose value faster, and the government continues calling it all stability. Because in Russia, stability often means one thing on television and something completely different at the grocery store. Guys, if you want to watch everything unfold in real time together with us, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video. 2027 will be here before you know it. Don't forget about the Patreon, link is down below. Thanks much, see you later.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims are all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.